Let's go. Yeah. Here we go. Pass the scope. Pass the scope. When you need to amplify, share your stories on the fly. Call Pass the Scope. EDU will bring it to you. Your event. We got you. Conference tips. We got you. Stories told. We got you. Around the globe. We got you 'cause we're Pass the Scope. Hey, pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. Pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. Hey, pass the scope. EDU coming to you live. That's right. Here it is. We are live. This is Pass the Scope EDU. We are live with the After the Bell edition of FETC. You know how we do it. We like to make sure that we can ignite a passion for learning one scope at a time. And we are doing it virtually this year for the conference season here at FETC. Got Tatul dancing in the background.
I know he in the pocket with it. He in the pocket with it.
I'm in the pocket with it. What's up, Brian?
What's up?
What's
Val? Going on, man? Go ahead and introduce yourselves to the audience.
Hey, everyone. Dr. Tatul Toya here. And I'm really excited to get into the conversation today and be able to share the space with these two fabulous human beings.
All right.
And I'm Valerie Lewis, and I'm excited to be here as well, just to unpack FETC. This is day 3 for FETC, but day 2 for our After the Bell series, and just interested to hear what our newfound friend, Dr. Jill Seiler, was unpacking in her keynote today, and speak to Curriculum Associates and Epson Education back in the building again today with some special guests coming in on the tail end of the show.
Absolutely. You know, Valerie's fresh from the highway. You know, I always like doing these shows with Valerie because when she's coming home, we can always hear cars in the background. So I try to tell by the engine what type of car that is rolling by. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you joining us. We do this After the Bell series because we know during this virtual conference season, many of us haven't taken off of work to be able to participate in these conferences. And there may be some episodes or some sessions and some things that have taken place that you may have missed. So as we do, we want to make sure that we amplify the stories and the voices of the people of the conferences. So we want to make sure that we actually get you caught up with what took place and then help you look forward to the remaining sessions throughout the evening or the next day. So that's what the After Bell season session is all about. So today, we're going to start the show off with a very special guest from Curriculum Associates, Ken Tim. We're going to bring him right on right now.
Hey,
Ken.
Hey, hi guys.
Hey, Ken.
Ladies. How are you?
We are good.
Yeah,
we're
breathing.
breathing.
Tell you the truth.
Aren't we all? It's very challenging times.
Yeah, indeed. But we're all thriving. Just to go along with the theme of the opening keynote today, we're all thriving, during this time as well. So thank you for coming on with us, Ken. We know that you guys are playing a pretty cool role with FETC. So go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. My name is Ken Tam. I've been with Curriculum Associates for almost 7 years now. Prior to joining Curriculum Associates, I was a teacher. So I taught elementary school in the classroom for a number of years. Left the classroom, spent some time working at university to do some research projects there, and worked for a school district and a large publisher. So my role at Curriculum Associates is I get to be the person who gets to work with districts all across the country and to help them really improve their data literacy so they can use assessment information to really inform and drive their instructional practices.
Nice. Well, Ken, I'll be the one to say, a lot of times, we sit on edge, and you're a smart man, Ken, because within the first few seconds, you clarified real quick that I was a teacher. And we love to hear that because, I think a lot of times when when it comes to companies and big companies, a lot of times teachers may have that feeling that maybe you guys don't really know what we need. And oftentimes it's just a sales product pitch. So for Curriculum Associates to have you on board for the past 7 years, tell us what your background experience has allowed you to bring to the EdTech world on that side from a teacher's viewpoint.
Thanks. So I think what we pride ourselves in, not just me, but a lot of my colleagues are all former educators. And what we really bring is the ability to make sure that we listen. So over the past year, we've made about 100 improvements to the program. And the genesis for maybe all 100 or 99, a vast majority, is feedback from educators themselves. So we pride ourselves in listening to what people are telling us. We act upon it, and we try and incorporate it into the programs, ultimately to make their lives better, as well as theirs for the students as well. Right. So being able to make sure that we prioritize the feedback and really think about what are some of the challenges they're facing, and help design programs to improve that.
Awesome.
So you've talked about these improvements that you've made, and I don't know how much of that was informed with our current environment. And I know a lot of schools and coaches and administrators and teachers are trying to figure out like what solutions can best help them in this challenging time. So what are some of the improvements that you've made that is specific to the environment that we're in?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think we actually had to accelerate on our roadmap a bit to actually add in new functionality that we had always planned, but we wanted to, given the situation, accelerate and deliver them now. So one of them, I know that a lot of educators are really concerned about their students, and in particular, their unfinished learning. So I may have I used to teach 5th grade, and if I had students who are working at a 2nd or 3rd grade level, I need to understand how can I support them, right, with their unfinished learning. So with that in mind, we actually created something called the prerequisite report for mathematics. So the idea is that if we believe that assessment is important to inform instruction, why don't we use the assessment data that we have, figure out based upon the lesson that I'm about to teach next week or the unit of instruction, let's say add and subtract fractions, what are the prerequisite skills kids need to have in order to be successful with that? So by still focusing on grade level and designing scaffolds appropriately, we can use the assessment data to figure out which students are ready, which students need some support, and which students need in-depth review. So by grouping our students, we can have teachers really address their specific needs. And our belief is not just to tell you where kids are, but also providing you with the resources. So if I know that this group needs in-depth review on these prerequisite skills, here are also the resources that's available to you to address their needs and design scaffolds so that they can be successful with grade level instruction. There's other ones that we've added recently. We know that this year, data is more important than ever. So I think what sets us apart, this question I got earlier from another interview was, what is different about Curriculum Associates or iReady versus some of the other assessments that districts are utilizing? So I think historically, most districts are utilizing norm referenced assessments. So they would give you the ability to compare kids against one another from a national percentile rank. We think it's important that you go beyond that and let teachers know where students are relative to grade level, helping you understand that if you're in 5th grade, you have kids starting the year not only at the 30th percentile, but that student is working at a 3rd grade levels in numbers and operation, but maybe at a 4th grade level in algebra and algebraic thinking. So being able to have that information, that criterion reference information, is really valuable as a way to really address the needs ahead.
Something you mentioned, Ken, that had me thinking. Today we were having a conversation, and I won't say who those programs were. None of them are part of the FETC conference right now, but we were talking about the RTI process and students being referred to SST. And so there was that vertical alignment happening between, I'm at the high school level as an assistant principal, but the elementary schools, the middle schools. We're talking about these programs that they have that they felt like they could get some information from, but they weren't as robust as what they needed. So they could only get to a certain point, and then they hit a dead zone, and there's nothing more that they could do. And so it was ironic because our school psychologist just asked me today about implementing some of these same programs at the high school level to help with the RTI. And I'm going, oh, but the elementary and the middle school just said they hit a dead zone, and those are the kids that are feeding into us. So why would I be using that program? And so what you're saying is, it sounds like Curriculum Associates has something that might also offer that, but not just offer it, but give us some next steps on what to do, which goes into the intervention piece, not just the data, but what can we do to see if we might rectify before referring or testing a kid for special education even.
Yeah, that's correct, right? So a lot of the work that I do with districts across the country, especially this notion of RTI or MTSS, has become really important, right? We know that there's kids with more unfinished learning. Some of our own research that we did this year played it out. So over the fall, we have about 8 million students using iReady, and that's about 1 in 4 students across the US in K-8. So we actually did our own analysis to try and figure out from an RTI or what percentage of students are 2 or more grade levels below this year than in past years. So if you go to the website, curriculumassociates.com/fall 2020, we detailed some of the findings there. And somewhat similar to what you've seen in other learning loss studies, students are slightly further behind this year than in past years. That is more pronounced in the middle grades, like grades 1 through 4, and it's more significant in math than in reading, right? We're actually looking at the winter data as well right now to see what was the impact of remote or the learning that students have engaged in from this fall to winter, and how does that compare to prior years. So we're still looking at that information, but hopefully we can share those findings with you and others in a couple of weeks when the majority of students have finished testing. Okay. From an RTI perspective, one of the things that we hear of educators wanting to know is 2 things. How can I group my students more effectively so that in my tier 2 and my tier 3 groups, students have similar needs? So what we want to do is just go beyond and saying these are the kids who are performing at the 25th or the 15th percentile. We want to tell educators how students are performing relative to the areas that they need to focus on. So in reading, for example, it's giving you information about vocabulary, comprehension, phonemic awareness, phonics, some of those foundational skills to understand where kids are from a grade level, so I can design my interventions accordingly. And math, being able to let you know where kids are from a grade level relative to the 4 areas of mathematics: numbers and operation, algebra, geometry, and measurement. And then go into the level of depth necessary to identify what kids can do or what they're ready to learn next. Because I think we would all agree that when it comes to special ed or RTI, it's really important that we have an asset-based philosophy. Start with what kids know and build from there, as opposed to more a traditional deficit model.
Excellent. Yeah, I've got a question though. I overheard a conversation in regards to Curriculum Associates about you guys venturing into providing support for families who are assessing at home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you able to talk a little bit about that? You know, because now parents are becoming more of a partner in the learning process. You know, with pods, taking place because of the pandemic. Yeah, speak upon that for us a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, so one of the things that we did to really understand student needs this fall was actually we coded into the system a very simple question that pops up when kids take the assessment. Are you at school or are you out of school? Are you taking the test out of school? And the reason why we bring that question up is because when we look at the data, it was interesting in the sense that students who tested in school were further behind this year than in prior years. Students who tested at home actually are scoring better than in prior years, right? And I think we would all agree that there may be some inconsistency with that data. And what we find is that some parents may have been helping students and that it could be skewing the results. So if you don't know where they're taking the test, how are you able to look at the results? So with that in mind, one of the things that we did for parents is we actually created some resources so that they better understood the purpose of the assessment, right? So a colleague of mine recorded these short 1-2 minute videos helping parents understand why the purpose of the assessment, how it's important for kids to try their best and not give assistance. We use the analogy of an eye test. Being able to, we don't want to help our kids take an eye test, but we want to know what the results are so that we can figure out what is the right prescription for the students in terms of vision correction. So we actually added that. We added more resources around parent support, helping them understand how to interpret the reports, along with being able to see how can they use that information to think about what can they do next.
Excellent. Hitting everything full circle. Go ahead, Tutul.
Yeah. And along those lines, we had a great conversation about access yesterday, and wondering in your perspective, kids are at home more than ever doing some of this work. My son does iReady, and I'm a big fan of iReady, and the fact that he's in kindergarten, but yet he can still navigate, and you can hear him in the background, he can still navigate some of your processes. And I'm wondering, this access conversation, and what type of conversations are you all having over Curriculum Associates in terms of access for all of our students?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And actually, so back to one of the enhancements that we made over the year is we actually added closed captioning. So access and equity is really important to us, right? So from an access perspective, we actually added additional functionality so that we can support all learners. So for those students who need the visual support, let's say an English learner, we've added closed captions for all the lessons that we have. From an equity perspective, we hear over and over again that a lot of students are not as engaged in the curriculum, unfortunately. And I think when we dig deeper into it, some of these students will say that the content doesn't reflect me, right? Doesn't provide me with a way to look at this cultural and linguistic responsiveness that we know is really important. So one of the things that we've done is we've actually redesigned a lot of our lessons to make sure that we put equity, or CLR, cultural linguistic responsiveness, at the forefront. That way we can design lessons that allow students to see both a mirror, a reflection of themselves. So we want to make sure that we select diverse authors in being able to design the lessons around that text so that me as an Asian, I can see myself in the lessons. At the same time, we also want to make sure that we provide windows so that if I'm looking at lessons, I can see the culture of others so that I have a better understanding of everyone within the United States. So access and equity has been really important. We've done a lot of work. We're not perfect, we're getting better, but we've really solicited the advice of a lot of thought leaders in this particular area.
Tutul, you said your son is using the iReady as a kindergarten. So I hope you're not one of the parents taking the test and stuff for your kids. So I hope that you're letting him show what he truly knows. But speak, Tutul, from a parent perspective. You said you like the program. And what is it that you like as these early learners? Because what Ken can probably expect is parents are going to be concerned with this pandemic and that their kids weren't able to go to school face-to-face, some of them. And there's that concern about a regression possibly happening or a gap in learning, somewhere upwards of a year to a year and a half. So what are you seeing in this iReady from a parent perspective that you really love?
Yeah, what I really like about it are the characters. Like my son really, he knows all the characters, and every example that's given, it's always around those specific characters. And so he's connecting with the characters, so that's really important. And then you talk a lot about you talked about the data pieces at the very end. He can see where he scores, and he gets like these little stars that I got a star today, and he gets to see the fact that he's got 30 out of 33 assignment completed in a row, and he can see what his scores are, so that we can have that conversation in kindergarten. And we can also have a conversation when he gets stuck sometimes. Like early on, he would get stuck, and I can like talk him through what's happening. But iReady does a good job of responding. No, here is what you're supposed to be doing. Let's try it again. Let's try, right? Like like helping him think through the problem instead of just giving him the answers. So that's what I really appreciated about it. And it's really made him more independent. And when he does iReady lessons, he doesn't need me as much because iReady kind of walks him through all the modules. And if he gets things wrong, it talks him through it. So I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the conversation you're having about seeing themselves in in the curriculum. And I wish we had a little bit more time to dig into that, because I think that's a big deal. And to be able to have that functionality in the curriculum that's being given to our students, especially for my kid, and I have a younger a child as well who's going to be in kindergarten soon. I think that's a big deal for me, that I know that when he's interacting with some of these products, that he's able to see himself and point out that, oh, that kid has same hair as I do, or the same skin color as I do, and he can kind of connect with that. So that's really important.
Oh, thanks. And I know that what you just really touched upon is something that we've really prided ourselves in. So as we were thinking about redesigning these lessons, right, we added the cultural responsiveness. We also wanted our lessons to be more responsive. What I mean by that is we wanted these lessons to provide feedback to students so that we really engage in a productive struggle. That if they don't get it right, they don't give up right away, that they have an opportunity to try it again with some corrective feedback so that they can become a lot more independent. As you're thinking about the lessons, I know it's a little bit early. Have you taken a look at the learning games that we've created? So this
They're out of sight. I love those games. A little gupper, little fish.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic.
We've actually added those learning games to grades 6 to 8 as well. And I think what we found is what was really interesting is that kids will love games, and we really wanted to tap into that. So we've created games to really make sure that kids have an opportunity to build their fact fluency, their number fluency, because that was one of the areas that we're seeing within the data, that why are the kids not doing as well in mathematics this year than in past years, is that they really lost a lot of that number sense fluency from being out over the past couple of months.
I'm convinced Brian Tatul's doing the work. Did you see how excited he got?
Yes, indeed.
And then the hand motions with the little guppies. Yeah, so Tatul's doing the work. You just you're busted, Tatul.
For sure. Well, Ken, you've shared a lot with us, a lot of valuable information. And I know we run up against our time, with you. I just wanted to real quick show the audience some ways they can actually connect. Let me get Tatul off the screen here, though. I don't know why he's on the screen. Let's do that right here. There we go. So social media, they can connect with Curriculum Associates that way. So it looks like you have a Facebook page, Twitter, both under Curriculum Associates, LinkedIn, of course, and then Instagram's Curriculum_Associates. Are those great ways for them to connect with you guys?
That's great. Yep, you can reach us out on all the media platforms, and we have a great team that will respond and share with one another.
Excellent.
Yes. Ken, you are definitely the man to do the job. I mean, you clearly are knowledgeable. And we appreciate you breaking it down and restoring our confidence in when people are designing, they are designing in mind for students, and all the aspects and the upgrades that you guys have made tells us that your team is definitely focused. And so we appreciate. So guys, make sure you follow. Brian has that graphic. We'll continue to tweet that out. But follow Curriculum Associates if you're looking for those RTI and SST, and you really want not just data and information, but you want to do a deeper dive on interventions and resources and those next steps. So that way we can make sure that we close the gap that already existed, but then we can also cure to whatever extent possible we can based on what was lost during the pandemic. Curriculum Associates, check them out in the iReady products.
Thanks. And then one last, we actually created a intervention planning template. Let us know if you're interested in seeing that. We're happy to share with folks.
Yeah, shoot that over to us and we'll share it with our audience as well, Ken.
Sounds great. Hey, thanks for having me, guys and ladies.
Thank you, Ken.
Bye now.
Bye now. All right.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh,
And
good stuff.
For the record, Valerie, I'm not doing the kids' work.
No, you were a little too excited. You were a little too lit on this little guppy thing. You were like,
Those
oh.
no, those games are really good because like kids hate math. Like they hate math.
Yeah.
And to have my kid like enjoying math and enjoying putting numbers together, because it's like a fish and there are numbers that pop up like these little eggs, and the fish has to eat the eggs, and but they has to be in the right combination. It's fantastic. And he loves it. He was doing it for I can put it on right now and he'd do that game for hours and hours.
Wow. Well, I failed to ask Ken if they go up to the high school age, or do they just cater to the elementary?
Oh no, he said it 6 to 12. He said they just
It is
created
6
some
to 12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
some
yeah.
more. So
Yeah.
very
Sweet.
interested in checking that out.
Fantastic.
All right, our next guest is already ready. She's back in the green room. Go ahead and bring Kayla on. Hi, Kayla. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So
Love the paint color back there, Kayla.
Is that a
Thank
virtual
you.
background? Or is that real?
This is my real background. I just moved in. I just bought my first house. So,
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations. Party at your
you.
place, apparently.
Yeah, it's a little under construction, but we'll get there.
That is nice.
Yeah, we're all under construction, so don't worry about that at all. I saw someone moving in the background, so I figured I'd ask as a joke.
Yeah, there's a mirrored wall behind me, and it's tripping people out a little bit on Zoom. Sometimes they think I'm talking to the person over there, which is just the back of my head.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the After the Bell edition for FETC with Past the Scope. We hear you represent Epson. Is that right?
I do. I am a product manager on the Epson Business Inkjet desktop team. So I hear you may have talked with one of my colleagues on the projector side, Jason. So I'm here to talk about print today.
That is awesome. Yeah, we did speak with Jason yesterday, and I mean, he enlightened us. That was a great conversation and just got us to considering that display size matters, just things that we just take for granted. So that was definitely eye-opening. And thank you, Brian's right on the money with this graphic that was really mind-blowing and just made us think about how many times, our students are sitting in the classroom and may not even be able to see what is happening, let alone process the information, and how we keep going because we're teaching and we've got other kids that are responding. And so when we talk about that display size, that was enlightening. So we'd love to hear what you have and what Epson is presenting on this print technology side.
Absolutely. So is it okay if I share my screen?
Oh, absolutely.
Go for it.
Okay. So I think we'll see a little bit of overlap here with some of the things that we saw with, let me just make sure I'm selecting the right one, that we saw with Jason, and focusing on color and the importance of color in education, and some of the things that we've learned about the retention rate of color and how students are remembering things, not only when they see it in color visually on the screen, but also the printed page or the workshop in front of them. So we've broken this down first, just looking at both K-12 and at higher ed and why they might need to print. It might seem a little bit outdated. A lot of students are working on their iPads and their Chromebooks now, and it's different when I was in school, which feels like not even that long ago, but we still had the projector with like the arm that came up and they would like write on the clear paper.
Yep. That overhead.
The overhead.
Don't talk about my overhead, man. Don't talk about my overhead.
With the transparency sheets and the vis-a-vis markers.
Yeah.
I started at Epson and I saw the interactive and smart projectors. I was like, wow, school has come a long way since I was there.
Yes.
And it hasn't even been that long. And I saw that, is it Tutul? You have a Loyola Marymount shirt on. I went to LMU.
LMU, yes, indeed.
Right.
Yes.
LMU Lions. I did my MBA program there.
Look at that. I got my admin credential there.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, the education program there is fantastic. It was also the very biggest group at graduation. It took a long time to get through all those names. But circling back, so at the college level, just some of the things that we found, college students remember information better, 81% better when they're working with printed materials. And I know that's something I did in college too. I didn't like having an online textbook. I wanted the physical book that I could highlight and handwrite my notes. And at undergrad at SC, at least at the time I was there, we weren't allowed to have laptops in the classroom. So it was a rule, at least at the time at Marshall, we had to handwrite all of our notes in our classes, just because of that physical act, helping to remember better, but then also reading from it again later. And then I talked about color. So color recognition, seeing things in color helps remember, 80% more. And then we've got the college students simply prefer those printed course materials. And then on the K-12 side, we're seeing that readership is improved at about 40% by having these colored materials, and then retention again at that 80%, and then boosting comprehension. So all of these reasons why we should have more color and have more printed material. So now that we have that, we've got to talk about a couple of the options that we have with Epson to be able to kind of help to print. So all of these reasons for color and education. So in order to help you guys print, what I wanted to talk to you today about, way too many printers here. We're not going to go through all of these, but that bottom row are super tanks. So you may have seen a commercial or something about eco tanks or Shaq or Shaquille O'Neal is our spokesperson. Yeah, he has some fun, humorous content. But the big idea here is that it's 2 years of printing guaranteed. So that way you as teachers or administrators or whomever may be printing these materials, and even, now as parents at home with your students' materials, we've heard, that pain point of having to constantly replace ink, or you're in the middle of a print job and the ink runs out, or the cost of ink that it can be to replace. Really trying to look at that and make this printing in color affordable. And so with the Super Tank, it's the 2-year limited warranty, but with the 2 years of ink guaranteed. So it comes with bottles of ink instead of cartridges that you kind of tip into the machine and it fills into that tank there. And that in itself is enough, or the ink yield should be enough for 2 years of printing. But if you run out of ink within that 2-year period, you can buy another set of ink and we'll reimburse you for it. And then we'll do that kind of 2 times within that process, just so you don't have to worry about it. Just one less thing off the plate. You have so much going on, as teachers, especially this big shift in teaching in hybrid situations and online. So just making it easy for you. We know the importance of color and printing, and now let's just make it so that you can print without even thinking about it, and especially worrying about that cost that may have been a concern before.
Got it. Well, I will tell you this. After years of talking about going paperless, in the classroom,
Sure.
Because we were approaching this digital age, I have a college student, and she came home, because of the pandemic, at Thanksgiving break, and I had to replace my ink twice for the amount of times that she was actually printing.
She was there.
Yes. And I will tell you this, we hadn't used our printer in probably 2 years, as we see that transition. So how do you guys see yourself evolving in that space as things become more digitally oriented?
Yeah, and it's interesting too. And I think we've seen different trends in the industry. We actually just did some research in education with some teachers that were teaching either a hybrid situation, or they were in the classroom teaching, but the students were at home. And one of the situations we had seen is that it helped with the engagement with the students, that they had to kind of go back a step and physically turn in homework again and kind of physically write that down rather than, being on the screen. In this instance, they weren't as responsive. So here we were hearing about the schools were creating packets and printing out these packets of homework and worksheets for the students to take home and then kind of bring it back. And then similarly with the teachers, they're grading and making those marks on hand and having just more of what feels like a hands-on touch, especially now that they're a little less in person than they were before.
Gotcha.
Now I'm fascinated about the 2 years of ink, because I won't name the company. I won't name the company, but I went out and got a little printer, because you're right. The kids had worksheets to print. The teachers weren't, they were thrown into this whole technology sea, and they didn't know how to adapt these worksheets that they had been printing out before in this digital format to get kids to be able to write and respond. You know, fortunately for me, I was able to go out and get a printer. Not every family is able to do that. But
Sure.
I swear, like after I printed 6 sheets of paper, that little light was flashing.
Yes.
And I'm like, what? And I had to go buy more, more ink. And guess what? The little cartridge is like 30 some bucks.
They're expensive.
I'm like, I can't do this. I'm like, wait a minute now. You don't have to give me more than just 6 sheets.
Why
So
you think I
you're
was so
telling
hot?
me, I'm like, man, so you're telling me 2 years worth of ink. And I'm like, look, that's where it's at. But, one thing that you mentioned in the statistics about being able for students being able to retain information a whole lot better. You talked about the color aspect. And so I'm thinking automatically access. So here we are thinking going paperless, as Brian mentioned, is a plus, is a bonus. We're reducing paper and we're saving the environment. And I understand that definitely to an extent we have to do that. But I'm thinking about, once again, kids with special needs and that they need to see things, or they may need to write in order to process information. And if teachers are taking it for granted that I shared this information with you, you have access to it, because I hear them saying all the time, go to the LMS platform, it's there, and kids aren't making the connection, then are we really servicing kids fully? And so that just made me think about that aspect of things.
Absolutely. And yeah, and it's so interesting, with it being virtual, and to know, are the kids engaging, are they using those resources that's there? And I think that, at least with one of those teachers that we had been speaking with, being able to kind of, have the students physically write down, and kind of, whether it was scan, and they're using their multifunction printer to scan the work back in again, so that the teachers can kind of see that they are doing this work, and it is, being comprehended on that level. And I think one of the things, too, with the 2 years of ink, we can even go beyond that in some circumstances. There's one of these printers, and we worked with a school system where it has a 40,000 ink pack yield. So you have this ink pack. It looks like this pouch. It almost looks like a suitcase. It has a little handle on it. It's so big. And you can slide it into the printer, and it'll print 40,000 pages. Meaning, if someone's printing 1,000 pages a month, which is a lot of pages, that's like Gone with the Wind every month. And they could do that for over 3 years before they would have to replace that ink. It's crazy.
Wow, I'm thinking about getting one from my own house. My goodness, that's fantastic. One of the things I was thinking about, and I don't know if this is a question, maybe more of a commentary, but like, we've been talking about going paperless, fully paperless, and there's a whole thing on Twitter on ditch the textbooks and whatever. But that data you showed is very compelling on the learning process for our students. And I'm trying to think about how we can like combine the two, where it's not 100% paperless. I can add stuff to the LMS so kids have access to, but maybe I can print out some color copies or something along those lines to class supplement and help kids take notes, because I think that taking note process is really important to connect the dots. So I'm just thinking about how educators might still use, because a lot of students are still saying, hey, even adults, I still need that tangible something to write to help my learning process. So I'm just thinking about how we might be able to kind of combine the two, so we're not just relying on the digital or physical space to give content to our students.
Sure. And I think it's a lot, like a hybrid, again, like a lot of the situations, doing some online and doing some of the printed material to, make sure we're engaging as best we can with the students to help with that retention and motivation by having some printed materials. And then, of course, the environmental impact is very important. And some of the other ways that we take a look at that is with things like low energy consumption of our devices. So with our devices, an easy way to kind of explain how much less energy they might be using than competitive printers that are laser printers, we are primarily inkjet, which provides for a very simple design because it doesn't use heat. Laser typically uses heat to heat up, and that's how the ink is coming up, or the toner is coming onto the page. With inkjet and its heat-free design, it's using a lot less energy. So we had one customer use case that was using a mobile cart, and they were powering the cart to be able to print packing slips. And they had a laser printer, and they had 220 pounds of battery on the cart to be able to print with it. So it wasn't even that mobile. And the cart lasted about 8 hours. They switched to the Epson printer, and they could reduce down to one 11-pound battery, and they could have that run for 12 hours. The printer itself, it had the same speed, the specs and features were there for the customer. Just using that much less energy meant that they could have a seamless integration of one battery charging for 12 hours, one in the cart, switch it out, and now they're working 12-hour operations with far less battery power and energy consumption.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thinking about, global warming, thinking about energy consumption, carbon footprint, and how your machines can kind of, help address some of those challenges. That's interesting.
Exactly. And another way to look at it is, these ink bottles that we're using that fill the tank that have a very high ink yield. Or we also have that one we talked about, single ink pack, that has a high yield of ink, as compared to the amount of times you're running to the store to get more ink cartridges, more ink cartridges. And so now you're recycling all of this, plastic material for the same print volume as you could have done with this one set of bottles or this one pack of ink. So kind of different ways we can help to reduce our footprint while still being able to print printed pages and then help with the benefits of color and education.
You got me thinking differently. You really do. I just want to go back though a little bit, because you said something that made me realize that this is also a piece that helps with the inequities. We know that, not all kids can learn digitally or prefer to learn digitally. I have one of my own, and I'm a geek, so it kind of, saddens me that she doesn't want to be, or I just busted her out, so now everybody knows who she is. But, and instead of me getting frustrated that she doesn't want to embrace that environment, I can meet her where she is and provide what she needs in order to be successful by using things like your printer, or printing things out, taking advantage of the color aspect. We don't necessarily always think in that particular manner, just like yesterday with the screen size. We don't necessarily think about that as a piece to fight the inequities in the classroom as well. So I appreciate you bringing that particular piece up and causing us to think a little bit further.
Absolutely. And it, like you said, it is so interesting just how everyone, learns a little bit differently. I have 6 brothers and sisters myself, and just amongst us, how differently each of us approached education is just so interesting, which then I, turn and think, for you, you're working with, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 students in the classroom that all may need to be learning in a little bit different ways too, which amazing that you're able to do that and handle all of that. It is just incredible for you, all of you.
Well, I sure know that your parents are probably so glad that during this pandemic, all 6 of you are not in school and they have to do this because I don't even know. I mean, you're talking about bandwidth, all students having their devices and trying to keep up with all of the courses and modules. I mean, hats off to a lot of the parents just trying to juggle it all. But the Epson, you really represented and had us think of things in a different light, from yesterday with the projector, and then even today with print technology, and just understanding that we cannot just box all kids into one way of thinking. I know I tell my very own son, when you're writing notes, you got to make some of the things stand out on the page, bold, large. Our eyes naturally travel to that. So when you're talking about that colorism, I could see that piece as well. But I think there's a giveaway. You guys threw something in here.
We did. So we are going to be giving away a Workforce C 5290 printer. So this will have those ink packs that we talked about. And ink packs, when you buy these, you can have that yield of up to 10,000 pages of color. So you can print 10,000 ISO pages before you have to replace anything there. All printing in affordable color to help you to be able to engage with your students as best you need.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just wowing that you're actually going to give that away. So I think the task is pretty simple. So this is going to be a drawing that we're actually going to do for this. If they just go on Twitter and tag Epson Education and use the hashtag #IPrintWithEpson, is that how you're going to do it?
Yes, that is it. Looks great.
Simple and just under, I think it's just under $300 value. Maybe it might be that I saw, which is great.
Oh yes, we want to make sure we give one of our robust models to you, printing 25 pages a minute, so you can get lots of prints done and focus on other things.
So this is an easy win,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen. Come on now, this is easy. This all you have to do is go online, go on Twitter, and tag Epson Education, and use the hashtag #IPrintWithEpson for your chance to win an Epson printer. It's that simple. You'll be entered into that drawing to be able to do so.
Yep. And we'll
You can't
probably
get
do
any
like
easier.
a random name generator to be able to pull that winner. So yeah, Epson differentiated for everybody.
For sure. Well, Kayla, we'll definitely continue to shoot that out through the course of FETC. We want to thank you for joining us today and sharing, first of all, enlightening us and changing our mindset a little bit here. We definitely appreciate that. We always have room to grow, as we continue to learn in this particular space. So we thank you very, very much for helping us do so.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was so great talking with all of you today.
Yes, and congratulations again on adulting and purchasing your first home.
Why, thank you. Thank you so much. And go Lions.
Go Lions and fight on. You're a Trojan as well. Fight on. Yes.
That is excellent.
Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Too. Thanks, Kayla.
Bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Kayla Murphy with Epson Education. Once again, they did it again.
Did it again.
They did it again.
They did it again.
I see somebody in the green room. Are you?
Is that one of our special guests?
I gotta bring him on.
But I guess it's special. Oh, my friends, how we doing? Awesome, dude. Thanks for being here.
Doing very well, man. Glad to have you. You guys are done with Q&A?
We just finished up, so Bree should be joining us here any moment.
Oh, excellent. We didn't get a chance to even talk about it, and you popped in. We weren't expecting you yet because we figured after you guys speak, you guys will be peppered with a bunch of questions. So was there a time limit on it?
That's all right. It was. They shut us right down in 15 minutes. That's all right. I'm okay with that.
Wow. FETC, you didn't have to do them dirty like that. My goodness.
It's a cold game. It's a cold game.
It is all good. So do you know everybody on here?
I believe, let's see, I think I've met, Brian, I know we go back, Val, I know we're connected, and Dr. Have you met before?
No, I'm not sure if we have.
I was going to say, I can't forget a good looking face like that, my friend. So I
thank you. My COVID face.
No.
My COVID face.
No, Tom, don't butter him up. Listen, under that hat, Tatu's got a big head now. You just inflated it even more. Now we won't hear the end of it. Bree's on her way. So Tom, you want to tell the people who you are, give us a little background to the viewers, and that'll give Bree some time to get in here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what do we call that as a teaching technique? Like stalling, right? So let's turn it over to Tom for a minute or two until Bree gets over here. I just sent Bree the link there as well in case you didn't have it. But first of all, what an honor it is to be with you all. I respect the work that you do. I was checking out some additional pathoscopes and just the opportunity, for you all saying, hey, we want to amplify voices. I share that because that's something near and dear to my heart as well. I think we've all got a voice. Our voices all need to be at the table. And so the opportunity to pass that scope to amplify the voices of others is awesome. One of the ways I do that is through Future Ready Schools. And so I'm the director of innovation at Future Ready Schools, bipartisan, nonprofit, equity-focused group out of Washington, D.C. So I get to work with thousands of administrators in a given year, on things like leadership, culture, visioning, strategy, those kinds of things there as well. And I guess what's most rewarding about some of that work and being able to do it, and we don't sell anything. So I'm not here to like try and sell you, for $19.99 a month, you can be future ready too. Like that's not part of the conversation. We raise money to support folks because as an equity focused organization, we recognize, if we were charging money for events, charging money for virtual events, whatever it might be, we recognize which districts could come and which districts couldn't come. And so if we're going to be equity focused, we want to raise that money to be able to support people. And I guess, working around the country, working nationally now, having left the district that I was in for a long time, what motivates me and to be able to do work like this, no matter where I go across the country, there's amazing educators working so insanely hard for kids every single day. And in all classrooms across the country, amazing things are happening each and every day. And so amplifying those voices, giving stories to be a beacon of hope for other folks there as well. As a side note, I'm an author, get to do a lot of speaking, get to connect with educators all across the country in different ways. And so it's an honor to be with you. Thanks for having us on tonight.
Excellent.
That was a great intro, Tom.
Thanks.
I think he's done that before. Yes, maybe. It looks
You
like
think?
Bree has joined us as well. What's going on, Bree?
Hey, I'm so excited. It is super fun to be here.
Oh, glad to have you as well. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience here real quick.
Well, I don't have like the big, long, huge, fancy intro that Tom did. So maybe he was just kind of stalling until I could get logged in here. So we'll go with that. But I am Brianna Hodges. I am from Texas, y'all. I am a former English teacher, basketball coach, instructional coach, district administrator, director of digital learning, director of learner engagement and instruction, just all kinds of things. But really what that boils down to is I am an educator, I am a storyteller, and I am thrilled to get to be here with y'all. I also do get to work with Future Ready and I'm the Future Ready faculty member, and I also work specifically with instructional leadership and coaches. So I get to harass this guy every now and then and learn a whole lot from Tom along the way. So super excited to be here.
Excellent. You guys are fresh off your keynote.
We are. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope both people enjoyed it. We'll see. I'm just kidding. What an honor. FETC is a great conference, and shout out to Jennifer and the crew there. Been there many years, and so shout out to the crew there, especially being free this year, just giving people an opportunity that often don't get to go, and they can check out anything for 30 days. If I'm a teacher that never gets to do anything anywhere, I get it for free, and so a shout out to them for doing that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, time is the one thing that we don't have. And so to just be able to accommodate people in those needs that way, it's awesome. So unpack for us the session that you guys just did. What was it about? What were the highlights and the takeaways that the viewers that may be watching this or watch this replay broadcast might be able to expect?
Sure. So, Bree, we can kind of walk through. We did 4 keys to leading and coaching in any setting. And so, working with district leadership on my end, working for Bree with our instructional coaches and really running that strand and other instructional leaders and getting to do that. Jennifer asked us to kind of put our heads together on how can we share leading and coaching in any setting. And obviously right now we've got folks doing things in a hybrid environment, folks doing things fully virtual, high flex, kind of that new phrase of I'm doing both simultaneously. And like kudos to those folks, by the way, right? Or even in person. And so in developing those 4 keys, really working through, the first one we talked about, I asked people in the keynote to really reflect on their why and their purpose. Like going back to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, which has been around for like well over a decade. Like we spend so much time on that what and that how right now, right? Like we think about throughout this year, like what are we going to do about socially distanced in a cafeteria or in a classroom? What are we going to do about sports? How are we going to do that in a classroom with with limited space? Like we spent so much time because we've had to on the what and the how, but at the end of the day, like what's this really about anyway? And for me, this is about loving and caring about kids and giving kids opportunities greater than we may have had, or giving kids opening doors to opportunities and possibilities that maybe they didn't even know were feasible for them. And so, for us, it was really bringing it back, that first key, to reflecting on our why and our purpose. Because the reality is, in the chaos of the world of educators right now, in the hundreds of emails that they're getting, if they're teaching remotely, around the clock, we used to joke 24/7. If you're teaching remote, it feels like 25, 26, 8, right? I've heard that said over and over. Good friend Dana Castine says that all the time. And we think about those examples related to that. We've got to focus and hyper focus on our why, on our purpose, and we need to be intentional about it. Because just being real, how many times I personally lost my way while working in a school, while working at district office, because I got so deep in the weeds that I didn't take time to pause, to back it up, to just really reflect on why are we even really doing this anyway? And it's words like, when we hear things in schools, get to work with so many school and district leaders across the country, and you just listen to the way people speak. What's the language they use? Or is it words like me and my and I far more frequently than we and our and they? Shows people's mindsets. And so when anxiety and fear are so heightened right now in the midst of the pandemic, which is totally understood, everything is amplified. And it's why we've got to really refocus and pause to just say, why are we doing this work anyway? That was our first key. Bree, you want to talk about the second one?
Yeah. So our second one, we kind of took that, right? You have your why, and then now what? Now what do I need to do with it? And so our why really became around story, because we have to help explain and bring in and connect people to our whys in lots of different ways. And most often that is done most effectively through story. And so the first part of it is what we really wanted to focus on, especially right now when we've got so much that's hitting us, like Tom said, from every which direction, right? From media's perspective, this is a really difficult time right now, right? Because we've got to be really, honest with ourselves that being able to, if you are in a complete remote circumstance, right? If you are at your house, right? And maybe you're not an educator by trade as a parent. And now all of a sudden you're trying to do your full-time job, and you've got your fourth grader, and you've got your sixth grader, and you've got all of these things, and you've got calls, and you've got all of this stuff. And so it's super, super stressful right now. And so we've got to think about that, and we've got to, we talk about how last spring, everybody thought teachers were the most incredible people in the whole wide world. And then all of a sudden fall happens, and it's eek, nobody should be, all of a sudden, let's fire everybody. Let's get our money back. This was not a cool thing. And so people were like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And as educators, right, that just stabs you straight in the heart, because you're listen here, people, I'm working my tail off and you don't even understand. We're going through all these different elements. And so when we first started talking about this second key, I really pulled from Dr. David Cooperrider's theory of appreciative inquiry. And so what he says in this is that we can either focus on the deficits, which is often what happens as leadership, right? We focus on what we're not doing right, what we don't have, what we need to fix. But instead, we need to focus on what we have, what those strengths are, and then how we take those strengths to fix what comes next, right? So it basically, again, Brian's going to laugh. I'm going to pull this from a coaching perspective, right? Of I have to look at my team that I've got at this point in time, and I've got to be able to figure out what their strengths are to be able to take us to the next game. I can't sit there and hem and haw and be like, dang, I don't have a single person over 6 foot. This is going to suck. We're going to get it. We're going to get this handed to us. I can't make somebody grow their physical stature, but what I can do is I can choose the strengths that they have and then really wrap a plan around how to amplify that. Okay. And so that's what his theory is. And I think there's so much that good comes for that for us in education right now, is how can we take the strengths of what we do really, really well and use that to build the stories of how we get through this pandemic, right? Of how can we take the connections that we've made with our students, and we are owning that. We're really fantastic with that. And now how can we take that and up the ante around, remote work, so that way we are able to keep that learning moving forward. So within that, we really kind of talked about how once we have this note, this understanding of building our strengths and changing that, we move from trying to identify turnkey solutions to instead matching the best stories for our circumstance. And we shared some different pieces in there. I talked about the different stories that we need to be telling right now. There's 3 core stories that everyone across the country, whatever role you're in, needs to hear right now in crisis. And those 3 stories are your core identity story, who you are, like no matter what. The second one is your novelty story, or basically like your innovation story of like, okay, now we've had this problem, we're going to come at it from a different way, and this is how we're going to be successful with it. And then your third one is your learning journey. And so it's kind of the, hey, we've gone through some stuff. We've done really well with some pieces. We've learned from it. We've changed it. We've made some iterations. And now here we're going to keep moving forward, right? It's not a one and done. It's not a failure story. It's an iteration story. It's a continuation of learning as we move through it. And that's one of those big pieces that we forget about, because so often we wrap ourselves into, we have to have this big, perfect story where all of a sudden we saw this huge success. But if we do it right and we focus on those strengths, every single thing that we do will be a small success to share. So our second key became how can we have to connect, we have to experience, and we have to humanize learning through story.
Yeah, one of the pieces that I'll add to that, one of the things I talked to there is I spoke about my daughter's own medical journey. My daughter was born with very severe food allergies, and I share the story of the night that we learned about it, the night we almost lost her because she couldn't breathe. And it was just, I kind of walk through those pieces of, if my little girl came and sat on my lap and joined us right now, and you looked at her, you'd see this little 5th grade girl smiling ear to ear, and you couldn't see the story that's on her heart. You couldn't see the story because it's a hidden story within, as I call it, that's on her heart, and it often hides behind the smile. And so one of the pieces that I share is like, because we're so quick to judge quite often, right? And I share how the difference between making a judgment and having empathy, it's understanding the story. And so how do we get to know the stories of our people? Because I really believe, when we think about a child's story, really defines the context in which his or her learning occurs. And I talk about stories of racism, stories of abuse, stories of hope, stories of opportunity, stories of love, and how those are the students that come to us each and every day. But the flip side, every one of our colleagues has a story there as well. And so it's leading with an empathy lens instead of just rushing to judgment. So that's our second key there. Do you guys want to interject at all? Because I feel like I'm giving a keynote over again, right?
Yeah,
That's the first 2 right there.
Yeah, that's
I
the
wanted
key.
to talk
Is
a little bit
powerful.
about. I want to talk a little bit about that. The why are we doing this? Because I was just thinking the other day. A lot of my ex-students are friends of mine on Facebook, and just to see their journey, like post-graduation after they left us, and just to think about, like, especially in secondary, and Valerie, you're principal at a high school, but when you're teaching at a high school, everything is about content. We got to cover content. I got to cover it now. I don't have time to look at anything else but content. And we don't take the time to learn about our students and what they need and kind of connect with them and those stories and what direction we can help them move in. I was like, if I knew some of my students were interested in engineering, or want to be entrepreneurs, or we're going to go start their own business or become nurse, or whatever the case may be, I think my interaction with them would have been different. But we didn't have that time to just like foster that. And I was always big on relationships and building that with our kids. But like when we're in class, I don't have time. I got 12 standards I got to cover in chemistry, and we have to get through all these standards by the time the test comes. Then I got to do finals. I don't have time to sit back and listen to my students. So I've been thinking about that this whole week, and it's funny that you came on today to discuss that, because that's been really heavy on me now that listen to what my students are doing, and how we as a school and as a system can like tap into that a little bit more and really help our kids make those impactful decisions in their lives while we have them at the whatever school we're at.
Yeah, Dr. Ann, it's an interesting point, and just building on what you said there, I want to take everybody like pre-pandemic. And one of the pieces to think through is how back in March, when everything started to hit, that Friday the 13th that we all kind of remember, like kids start like, are they coming back? Are they going home for 2 weeks? Are we shutting down? The fear, the unknown, what's coming, not knowing all those pieces. What was fascinating to me is how quickly we reprioritized what was most important in our schools. It wasn't like, well, the math benchmark next Wednesday. Like, Val, as a principal, your first thought, some of your first thoughts, are our kids safe and do they have the food that they need? It reprioritized our world really quickly to say, at the end of the day, like, what's most important here? And I really believe one of the things I wrote in Personal and Authentic is like, if we care more about a child's academic accolades than we do about his or her heart, like, we have totally lost our way. Right. And I think under No Child Left Behind, I think under data, and data serves a place. It certainly does. But data without understanding the story, and we can make really bad decisions for kids. Right. And so, like, I think going back to those pieces, I think is so vital. And look, like, we've talked whole child, we've talked SEL for like decades, but do we really value it? Because, like, we can talk about it, but at the end of the day, do we really value it? And I think the pandemic has really brought the priorities back in order in most places, not in all places, to say, number one, like, man, the trauma right now that our kids and our families are going through. And if we're just blind to that, we've got our head in the sand.
So can I pop in on this too? Because I want to ask a quick question. So I want to look at this from a little bit different too, because as a secondary folk, I definitely, I always joke, right? Like as secondary teachers, right? We're like, just come in, sit down, be quiet, listen to me pontificate on all of my knowledge and just absorb it and you'll be set, right? Like you're like, yes, this is exactly where I'm at. And we always talk about how, well, we don't have time to get them to connect with this. But the other side of that is, as secondary teachers, we are content driven, right? Like, but I'm going to tell you, like, there is nobody who is more excited about English than I am. Like, I live, eat, breathe, exude literature. I can connect anything to any form of literature. And I would venture that you may be that same way about chemistry. And so part of what gets really exciting when you're trying to connect this why is that you get to look at your students and you get to find a way to be real, to help them develop that same kind of passion. And you know, one of the things that I always think about is that we've had teachers, all of us have had teachers who, like, even if their content wasn't something that was personally exciting to us, the way that they shared it, the way that they, got us interested into it, the stories that they would tell, all of those things just made us want to listen to them and want to connect with it. And that's really how we found ourselves becoming interested in that topic. And so I kind of look at it as, and I don't want to make this sound like, oh my gosh, now we can't quite put this, I'm not trying to put this on the kid, but I am saying that, how can we, instead of us as teachers trying to find 50, 60, 150 different connections from our content into those students' interests, how can we instead ask our students to bring things that they find interesting, and then we become that filter of connecting that to our content, right? Like, so bring me, it's kind of almost like spin the wheel for whatever you're saying, like, oh man, you can't tell me that chemistry has anything to do with how, with baking. Right. And then all of a sudden now you're put in, as the teacher, you're put into that position to connect with them, like the students telling you what they're interested in, and then you get to find your content connection that way. So like I said, I kind of look at that a little bit differently, because then that helps them find their own why. Right? Like, you don't need to find the why for them. They need to find their why. They need to know, like, chemistry is awesome because of this, not because Dr. N told me I should, right? Like, you need to help them kind of come to that on their own. And so much of that comes from leading with that passion and being passionate about your content. And again, going back to what Tom said, like, it's about that kid, but that kid has passion that you want to amplify, not try to overcome with your own passion.
This is great.
I need you to put that on a card.
That's my Hallmark
Great.
card right there.
That'd be a long Hallmark card right there, but I love it.
That's fantastic.
No, that's key. That's definitely the reformation that we need in education. You know, we're not first language arts teachers, but teachers of language arts, because you can cross curricular, cross connect, or, you know, find that interdisciplinary, whatever term you want to use. But when you help kids to see the math in sneakerheads, you know, when you talk about statistics, when you get kids to be able to see writing through a blog post because they want to tell you about those fast cars, then you're right. You're absolutely right. You'll find a way to link the standards to anything that the kids bring to the classroom and the learning. In that way, one, they're engaged, and you're not looking at a bunch of monograms or initials on the Zoom in black boxes. Now the kids actually want to talk to you because they almost feel like you can see them. You can see the true them, not see them as the student ID number on your roster. You see them, and therefore they will show up literally for you in that moment.
Amen.
And then I think you take it to that next level then for assessment, right? So like then you've had all this instruction that's around and you've engaged it with it, but then you let them tell their own stories of their learning instead of tell me what I already taught you. It becomes now this is what I've gotten from this conversation. You know, I always tell people my dad was a professor, and he was a science professor. And most people think, oh, science means that it's going to be multiple choice or whatever. But every one of his tests were essays, and he was notorious for writing on there, don't tell me what I already know. I have a PhD and I wrote the book like I already know what I know. I want to know what you know. I want you to tell me what you found useful, what you found, you know, all of those pieces. And again, that takes us from now we're engaged in learning to now we're engaged as a learner, right? Of like, now, then it becomes personal again to them, and you get that story as it comes forward. So, Tom, you want to share 3 with us, or we
Sure,
I might be jumping in front of Brian. So.
No, the third one that we talked about was for leading and coaching to be effective, we have to establish reciprocal trust and examine every action with empathy. And so I'll touch on it for just a moment and turn it back over to you, Bree, because I know you spoke most of the time in the keynote on this for you. But for me, when we're talking about trust is really the foundation of everything. And when we're talking about leading, when we're talking about coaching, if people don't trust, like, great things aren't going to happen. Like if I'm a principal in a building and I'm not working diligently to build the trust of my teachers, because it's real easy, especially as an administrator. And I've walked both sides. I've been the teacher at elementary, teacher at secondary. I've been the principal at elementary, principal at secondary. I've been at district office. So I've walked all sides of those. And here's the thing. It is so easy in our world to point the finger, isn't it? It's a lot harder in our world to look in the mirror. Like it's so hard when we're pointing that finger to say, well, you know, if my department chair would actually, if this person would actually. And so when we think about it, number one, trust like really also comes down to modeling. And so how do we model what we expect in other people? If I'm a principal saying, well, in remote learning, I know you've got to do these 37 different things at home, in person with all these different kids and one little, you know, how do you model the expectations that you have for other people? Because for me, that's foundational in trust. Working with and coaching principals and superintendents all across the country, I'll often get the question, one of the most like questions that I get most often, especially for newer leaders, is, hey, I'm approaching a new building. I'm a new principal. I'm a new superintendent. Like, where do I start? And for me, it comes down to start by building trust through relationships, through modeling, and really that foundational culture. And so that trust with that empathy lens is so vital there as well. Bree, any other quick thoughts on that? And then I can jump back to key 4.
No, I think the biggest thing that that we spent a lot of time on in the keynote was talking through Stephen Covey's 13 behaviors of trust, right? And so those are so important. I'm not going to go through all of them, but he really kind of puts it forward as there's 2 types of trust. There's a trust of character, and then there's trust of competence. And so much of that becomes, how do we interact with people, right? Are we, trust is a 2-way street, and it's not something that we are naturally given to do for others. There's lots of things that go in, that factor in to whether or not we trust somebody. And there's lots of chemical reasons that go into play and all those things that we don't have time to talk about. But so much of it becomes, we have to extend trust, which means that you're trusting other people. And then we can start to then protect that trust, right? So let's talk a little bit about what extending trust looks like. And one of the things that I like to look at is as a parent, if I am taking my youngest out when she was little, and I'm telling her, hey, it's okay for you to go and play over there in the park, and I'm just going to sit over here. And she's all excited about it, and she goes boldly running from me, and she goes out there and she's playing, right? Like, what she's doing is she's acknowledging that I trust her with what it is that she's doing, and she's running out there. The second option of that could be, I tell my daughter, yes, you can go play over there. I'm going to sit over here. And she starts to take a step towards the park, and then she looks over her shoulder immediately at me. Why is she looking over her shoulder immediately at me? Because she's not quite sure. Does she trust that I'm going to let her do this? Or does she trust that that she's going to be okay? There's all these different pieces that come into that, and we have to really start to kind of break that apart. If we don't trust our staff, if we don't trust our students with something, they know that immediately, right? Like, so we've got to be able to extend that and move that forward, and that comes from that relationship that really is built out in there. So that's my big step on trust.
And I know we've talked a lot about a whole lot of these time-wise. I'll touch on the fourth one, and I would say if I could almost do it in reverse order, I probably would have, because to me, this one's most important. And that's number 4, how leading and coaching to be most effective. Equity is a non-negotiable. And as I mentioned, working for an equity-focused organization out of DC, number 1, sometimes people will look and be like, yo, Tom, you're the white dude from middle-class America. Why are you talking about equity? And my response to that, number 1, is I believe people with platforms need to point out things that need to be discussed, need to be talked about, especially things that are inequitable. And let's face it, there's so many things. And, over the past year, especially, that we've seen, not just from the election, but to some of the killings that happened to last year, and so many different facets of things that have been so incredibly inequitable for our students, for our staff, even in just their work environments, that it's an area that we have to attack. It's an area that we have to look at, because if we don't, it's just going to repeat the patterns of the past. One of my best friends in the world is a guy named Ken Shelton, and Ken and I do a lot of work together. Ken and I have different backgrounds, different cultures, different upbringings, and as close as we are, one of the things I used to say is, like, we have to have these difficult conversations. And I love Ken because he's one of my best friends. I'll push back and be like, Tom, when you say that, let me one-on-one, he would say, Tom, like, you said difficult conversations. I want you to process that for a moment. Because I would say things, well, equity, it's a difficult conversation. We've got to be having this. And he taught me to really reflect. And I'm not talking about years ago. I'm talking about like 6 months ago, taught me to reflect of how when we say things like that as school leaders, as district leaders, we need to have these difficult conversations. It can also mean it's too tough to have right now, so we're just going to put it off. Or we don't really have the time to do this, so we're just going to keep putting it off. When we look at things across the board, like our discipline rates and disparities there, like our curriculum, who has mirrors in the curriculum, who doesn't have mirrors in our curriculum. When we look at things back in March with the whole access piece at Future Ready Schools, we work alongside the FCC, the new commissioner, by the way, that just got appointed by the president, Jessica Rosenwurzel, incredible equity advocate to support things like home access. And one of the points that I made in this area, back on March 13th, going back to like prioritizing who needs what, talking about food, but it also came like, oh shoot, like which kids don't have connectivity? But with all due respect, why weren't we having that question on March 12th? When we were asking kids to do things digitally at home? And at Future Ready, we released, you can check out futureready.org/homework gap. And it's been coined the homework gap out of Washington, DC. And yes, it's not about homework. It's about connectivity in those pieces. And it's about 16.9 million children that don't have the access that's needed. And disproportionately, it's our Black and Latinx students. And so what are we going to do about it? And so one of the pieces that I brought up is like that access piece, that's just one aspect of things. But do we have the humility and the vulnerability to remove our own blinders to say, like, I've been blind to things in my building, and like we've had lots of kids that didn't have connectivity that we've been asking to do things digitally, because about 70% pre-COVID of teachers ask kids to do something digitally outside of school, yet 16.9 million kids haven't had the access. Like, did we remove our blinders enough to say, like, hey, this has always been an issue? Because COVID didn't create equity issues. It took equity issues that have always existed and it amplified them and it brought them front and center. So for me, part of that challenge is like, all right, well, now that we recognize it, like, what the heck are we going to do about it? And I'm not saying those issues are all easy to solve, because there's funding issues. There's connectivity issues, if you're in a real rural area, and there's lots of examples of just that piece there, but like moving forward, like it drives me insane when people say, like, well, when we can finally go back to normal, like when you use an equity lens, like we can't go back to normal. We shouldn't want to go back to normal because of the vast inequities that have always been there in that regard. Like, normal to you, if that was comfortable, well, I think that shows something about the privilege and the way that you see the world that many of your students don't, by the way. And so when we look at an example of just the connectivity piece, here's a key takeaway for me. When this pandemic ends and we can bring kids back full time, 100%, all those hotspots, because like how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, I don't know the exact number personally, of hotspots have been ordered in the past year. Well, here's my question. When the pandemic ends and all the kids come back, you pulling those hotspots back? Because we're going to say, hey, I noticed you didn't have connectivity, so we're going to give this to you. Okay, but now that you're back in person, like all the other stuff you've got to do outside of school, the connectivity you need, like now we're going to pull it back? And so when we take a look at things like that, and again, I want to be really clear, sometimes in working with school and district leaders, when we talk about equity, I can tell you, and Bree and I were actually both running an event somewhere in the country, and we were talking about this equity aspect of things and asking people to really look deep into it. And we had 2 district leadership teams that were like, Tom, as I walked over the table, like, we don't think we have equity issues in our district. I want to be honest, like I wanted to vomit and cry at the same time. But for them, when they spoke about it, they were talking connectivity devices. That's it. And yes, over the past year, that's something that's been amplified, but that's like one aspect of it. Like, look at your hiring practices. Who are your leaders, your principals, your district level leaders? Do the demographics of that group match the demographics of our student? You got to ask yourself why or why not. And then we took a look, again, our curriculum. We can look at our learning spaces. Who's represented around our learning spaces? Who's not? Who feels inclusive and like feel like they can be there? Who doesn't? Because it's real easy if you're in a majority to look back and be like, well, I'm comfortable in my own lens. And so help of it, how do we make sure we rip our own lens apart to have accountability people that can have those conversations like I just told you that Ken had with me as one of my closest friends, that can call each other out in an inclusive way to say, look, like I need you to look at this, but also as a school and district leader to say, where have my blind spots been? And read as much as you can, connect with people on social media that have different viewpoints, different lenses, that think differently than you do, so you don't get in your own little shell and lose our focus here. And that was really our 4th key. And we could go on and on and on about that. Check out futureready.org. We do a lot of work in that area. Encourage you to check out those resources.
Tom, you all right with me? Brian, did you hear him go into, did you hear that?
I got a little fired up, my friends. I'm sorry. I got a little fired up. I know time's limited. So.
He went into, did you hear the little, the Baptist?
Yeah. I heard the preacher.
I don't know if Tom caught that he did that, but I caught it. I said, I said, watch out now. I said, we're going to have to clear the whole screen. But Tom, you all right with me? You all right with me, Tom?
Thanks, my friends.
Indeed. Oh my goodness. Well, I know we were way past our time, but it was well worth it having the both of you on. Let me go ahead and get everybody back on screen here real quick. I'm just going to do a real quick shameless plug because, Tom, we're going to have to have you on the Liberated Educator podcast with Shelton and D. Lanier. I'm just going to do that shameless plug there.
There it is. There's my boy right there. It's awesome. So give it a shout out. Absolutely.
So I produced that show. So whenever you're ready to come on, just
I didn't know that.
Brian, I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that.
Background, like,
well, knowing Ken, Brian, and if Ken's watching, I love you, brother, but I know Brian's got to be the brains behind that operation. I was just teasing. Love you, Ken.
Yeah, absolutely.
So real quick, I want to jump in and defend the order of the keys really quickly, because there was some methodology in this, which was that if equity is our ultimate purpose that we want to go through, then then to get to that, which it should be our ultimate purpose, right? Then we have to have our why. We have to have our why in there into that, which was why that became our first key. Then that moved into, in order to get to equity, we have to understand from other people's lens, right? Which is to have that empathy and to have those conversations. And then in order to do that, in order to get empathy, we have to have story, and story is developed through trust. And so just to defend the decision on why that was kind of placed in that way, that was kind of the methodology in getting to it, that, those are the four cornerstones of that, of our why, then the story, then the empathy, and the equity. So there you go.
Well, guys, if you missed their keynote, they were on, just in the past hour. Make sure that you go back and unpack that keynote and watch it in full. Write down some notes, take it back to your team, your district leaders. Tom, where can someone reach out? And, you said that you go around and you do these trainings. So how can they connect with you if they want you to come to their district?
Oh, sure. And thanks for the shout out. I'd go to my website, thomascmurray.com, because then it links to all the different social profiles. And I would love to connect with you all on social media. I'm somebody that tries to follow back, especially those folks that have differing viewpoints, or those people that are passionate about some of the same areas on that end there as well. So I'd love to connect with you on social media, Thomas C. Murray on Twitter, thomascmurray.edu on Instagram, and on Facebook as well. And so I appreciate the three of you having us on. It's been an amazing honor on our end. I think we talked about the keynote longer than we actually did the keynote. That's all right. Important topics here. So it's been an honor to be with y'all. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. And Brianna, where can they connect with you?
Awesome. So yeah, you can find me at briannahodges.com. I am on every social media platform at bhodgesedu. Would love to connect. You can find all kinds of fun resources. Stuff from today's keynote is at briannahodges.com/FETC. And would love to connect. Again, social media is definitely a huge, huge, huge part of where we share our stories and learn from each other. So let's connect. As I like to say, every story begins with an introduction. So give me a little shout and let's connect and keep moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you guys once again, Brianna, Tom. Tom, I think Doug's looking for you, so you better respond to his text.
All right, my man. Coming your way.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you once again for spending time with us here at Pass the Scope EDU today.
Thank y'all.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, once again, everyone, thank you guys for joining us for the Pass the Scope EDU After the Bell edition here at FETC. We appreciate everything you do to support us, but it's really about us helping to amplify your stories and your voices so we can ignite a passion for learning one scope at a time. We'll see you guys next time.